The Dominion had ruled the stars for 8,000 years. They were tall creatures with gray skin and 4 arms. Their eyes were black like the void of space itself. They had conquered 17 different species across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. No one had ever stopped them. No one had ever made them afraid. Their method was simple and cruel. They would arrive at a world with their massive warships. They would demand surrender. If the species fought back, they would crush them with overwhelming force. Then they would gather all the enemy soldiers who survived and execute them in public. They would broadcast these executions across all communication channels so that everyone could see. This broke the spirit of the conquered people. After watching their warriors die, most species simply gave up hope. Supreme Commander X had led over 200 such conquests. He was considered a hero among his people. His name was spoken with respect in every corner of the Dominion. He had never failed. He had never shown mercy. He believed that mercy was weakness, and weakness had no place in the universe. When his fleet of 300 warships arrived at the human colony of Nu, X expected another easy victory. The humans were a young species. They had only been traveling between stars for about 200 years. Their ships were small and poorly armed compared to vessels. Their weapons were primitive. X had studied reports about humans and found nothing impressive. They were soft creatures made of flesh and water. They needed to breathe oxygen and eat food constantly. They seemed fragile in every way. Nu was a green world with 2 moons. About 3 million humans lived there in cities spread across its single large continent. The colony had a defense fleet of only 40 ships. X almost felt disappointed. This would not even be a real battle. He sent the standard message demanding immediate surrender. The humans sent back a single word: no. X was amused. He ordered his fleet to attack. The battle began in the cold darkness above Nu. The human ships rose from the planet to meet the fleet. They were outnumbered almost 8 to 1. Their weapons could barely scratch the armor of warships. By all logic, they should have surrendered or fled. They did neither. The human ships fought with a ferocity that surprised X. They flew directly at his largest vessels, firing everything they had. When their weapons ran empty, some of them crashed their own ships into cruisers. The explosions were massive. X lost 11 ships in the first hour, 11 ships to a species that should have been crushed in minutes. The battle lasted 11 hours. In the end, physics and numbers won. The last human ship, burning and broken, made one final charge at X's command vessel before it was destroyed. All 40 human ships were gone, but they had taken 37 ships with them. X stared at the battle reports with something he had not felt in centuries. It was not fear exactly. It was more like confusion. How had such primitive creatures fought so hard? Why had they not surrendered when defeat was certain? He pushed these thoughts away. It did not matter. The battle was won. Now came the part he enjoyed most. The ground invasion was quick and brutal. Human soldiers fought in the streets of their cities. They fought in the forests and mountains. They set traps and ambushes. They used weapons, rocks, and even their bare hands, but they could not win against the endless waves of soldiers. After 2 days, the last human military positions fell. They had captured 2,847 human soldiers alive. These were the survivors, the ones who had fought until they could fight no more. Many were wounded. All were exhausted. But X noticed something strange in their eyes. They did not look defeated. They looked angry. He ordered the prisoners gathered in the main plaza of Nu's capital city. The buildings around the plaza were burned and broken. Smoke still rose from the ruins. Soldiers formed a ring around the humans, weapons ready. X had recording drones positioned to capture everything. This broadcast would be sent to Earth and every human colony. They would watch their soldiers die. They would learn what happened to those who resisted the Dominion. The humans stood in rows, their hands bound behind their backs. Some had bandages covering wounds. Some could barely stand, but none of them were crying. None of them were begging for their lives. This was unusual. Most species begged at this point. X walked in front of the prisoners, his four arms clasped behind his back. He looked at their faces with curiosity. These creatures truly did not understand their situation. "You fought well," he said, his voice amplified by speakers so everyone could hear. "Better than expected, but it was meaningless. Your colony belongs to the Dominion now. Your species will learn its place, and you will serve as an example." He gestured to his soldiers. "Begin the executions." They used energy weapons that killed instantly. It was considered merciful by Dominion standards. One by one the human soldiers fell, but something strange happened as the executions continued. The humans who were still alive did not panic. They did not try to run. Instead, they stood. Some of them began to sing. It was a slow, sad song in their language. X did not understand the words, but the sound made him uncomfortable. When there were only about 100 humans left, a woman stepped forward. She was small, with dark hair and dark eyes. Her uniform identified her as a captain. Her name tag read. Blood was dried on the side of her face from a wound on her head, but she smiled. One of the recording drones floated in front of her. She looked directly into it, knowing that millions of humans would eventually see her face. "My name is Captain," she said in a clear, calm voice. "Service number 7741 Alpha 3. I am speaking to my people, to Earth, to every human who will see this." X watched with interest. He allowed her to speak. It would make the broadcast more dramatic. "We fought hard," continued. "We made them bleed for every inch of our world. Remember that. Remember that we did not go quietly." She paused, and her smile grew wider. "And remember this moment. Remember what they did to us. Remember our names. All 2,847 of us." She looked at X then, her eyes meeting his. "You have made a terrible mistake," she said. "You think this broadcast will frighten humanity. You think watching us die will break their spirit." She laughed softly. "You do not know us at all. You do not know what you have just started." X felt a strange chill. He told himself it was nothing. "Kill her," he ordered. Kept smiling until the energy beam struck her. She fell without a sound. The remaining prisoners were executed quickly after that. When it was done, X looked at the rows of bodies. He told himself this was just another conquest, another victory for the Dominion. The humans would mourn and then they would submit. That was how it always worked. The broadcast was sent. It traveled through space at the speed of light, bouncing between relay stations. It reached Earth 7 days later. X returned to his duties. He had other worlds to conquer, other species to crush. The humans were already fatting from his thoughts. He did not know that across human space, billions of people had watched the broadcast. He did not know that they had seen smile and speak her warning. He did not know that something had changed in humanity that day. Something cold and patient and absolutely merciless had awakened. He would learn, they all would. But by then it would be far too late. The broadcast from Nu reached Earth on a Tuesday morning. Within 6 hours, every human being in the galaxy had seen it. They watched their soldiers die. They watched Captain deliver her final message. They heard her warning to the... And then something happened that the Dominion had never seen before. Humanity went silent. No angry messages were sent to the... No declarations of war, no threats of revenge, no diplomatic communications of any kind. The human government simply stopped talking to the outside universe. Their comm channels went dark. Their ambassadors returned home. Their borders closed. Supreme Commander X received reports about this silence and dismissed them. Every species reacted differently to conquest. Some screamed and raged. Some begged for peace. The humans had apparently chosen to hide and mourn. It made sense to him. They had seen what happened to those who fought the Dominion. Now they were afraid. He was wrong, but he did not know it yet. 1 month passed, then 2, then 3. During these months, spy ships tried to observe human space from a distance. What they saw was strange. Human civilian ships were being recalled from all over the galaxy. Massive shipyards that had been building cargo vessels were now building something else. Military ships, thousands of them. The production numbers made no sense. Humans were building warships faster than should have been possible. The spies also intercepted fragments of human communications. They heard the same phrase repeated again and again in different languages. The Brisbane Protocol. Whatever this meant, it seemed important. Every human government, every colony, every station had apparently agreed to it. This was remarkable because humans were known for arguing with each other constantly. For them to agree on anything was unusual. X's advisors brought these reports to him. Some of them were worried. The numbers coming from human shipyards were alarming, but X waved away their concerns. "Let them build their little ships," he said. "They are still primitive. They cannot match our technology. When they finally come out of hiding, we will crush them like we crushed Nu." His advisors nodded and said nothing more. They had learned not to argue with the Supreme Commander. In the 4th month, the first warning sign appeared. An observation station on the outer rim of human space stopped transmitting. These stations were small facilities with crews of about 50. They monitored human activity and reported back to the Dominion. When Station 47 went silent, the commanders assumed it was a technical problem. They sent a repair ship. The repair ship found Station 47 intact. Its power was still running. Its systems were still working, but every single crew member was gone. There were no bodies, no blood, no signs of battle. The crew had simply vanished. Inside the station's command center, the repair team found something that made their blood run cold. Carved into the main console in perfect script were 4 words: "We remember Nu." And on the floor, clearly visible, were boot prints, human boot prints. This news was sent to X immediately. He was disturbed but not alarmed. Perhaps the humans had gotten lucky. Perhaps they had found a single station and attacked it with overwhelming numbers. It meant nothing in the larger picture. Then Station 23 went silent. Then Station 89. Then Stations 12, 56, 77, and 91, all in the same week. Each time ships arrived to find the same thing: empty stations, no bodies, no evidence of how the humans had gotten in or where they had taken the crews, and always that same message carved somewhere visible: "We remember Nu." By the end of the 5th month, 34 stations had gone dark. Over 1,700 had disappeared, and no one had seen a single human ship. The Dominion High Council demanded answers. How were humans doing this? Their ships were slower than vessels. Their technology was inferior. They should not have been able to move through Dominion space undetected. They should not have been able to capture stations without anyone sending a distress signal. This was impossible. But it was happening. X ordered increased patrols. He sent warships to guard the remaining stations. He deployed sensor networks across all known approach routes. If the humans wanted to play this game, he would catch them. 2 weeks later, 3 of his warships disappeared. These were not small patrol boats. These were full battle cruisers with crews of over 500 each. They were in Dominion space, far from any human territory. They had been checking on a station that had gone silent, and then they simply stopped responding. When another fleet arrived to investigate, they found nothing. The warships were gone, no debris, no distress calls, no final transmissions, just empty space. On a nearby asteroid, someone had burned a message into the rock with what appeared to be ship-mounted weapons. The letters were massive, visible from orbit. "You killed 2,847. We remember every name." Fear began to spread through the Dominion, not among the leaders, not yet, but among the common soldiers and ship crews. They whispered to each other in dark corridors. They spoke of ghost ships and invisible humans. They wondered if they would be next to simply vanish. X tried to maintain order. He gave speeches about superiority. He reminded everyone that the Dominion had never been defeated, but even he was beginning to feel something he had not felt in a very long time: uncertainty. He called for his intelligence officers. He wanted to know everything about humans, their history, their psychology, their way of war. He had dismissed such information before because humans had seemed unimportant. Now he needed to understand them. What his officers told him was not comforting. Humans, they explained, had been fighting each other for their entire history. They had developed countless ways to kill, but more importantly, they had developed concepts that they had never considered. One of these concepts was called special operations. This meant small groups of highly trained soldiers who could infiltrate enemy territory, complete missions, and escape without being detected. Another concept was called psychological warfare. This meant attacking an enemy's mind and spirit before attacking their body, making them afraid, making them doubt themselves, making them see threats everywhere. The humans, his officers explained, were very good at both of these things. "Then we will adapt," X said. "We will learn their methods and counter them." But even as he spoke, he felt doubt in his hearts. They had conquered through strength and overwhelming force. They had never needed to be subtle. They had never needed to think like prey. The humans were teaching them a new kind of war, and the lessons were terrifying. That night, X stood alone on the observation deck of his flagship. He looked out at the stars and tried to imagine what the humans were planning. Where would they strike next? What did they want? He thought about Captain and her smile. He thought about her words, "You do not know what you have just started." For the first time in his long life, Supreme Commander X wondered if he had made a mistake. Out in the darkness of space, invisible and patient, the humans continued their work. They were not ready to reveal themselves yet. They were still preparing, still positioning, still waiting. But soon, very soon, the waiting would end. And they would learn what happened when you gave humanity a reason to hate. The Dominion High Council met in their great chamber on the Of Prime. 12 of the most powerful leaders in the galaxy sat around a circular table. Above them, holographic displays showed maps of their vast empire. Red dots marked every station that had gone silent, every ship that had vanished. There were so many red dots now. Supreme Commander X stood before the council. For the first time in his career, he had no good news to report. The humans had not shown themselves for open battle. They continued their shadow war, striking and vanishing like ghosts. Over 4,000 had now disappeared. Morale across the fleet was dropping. Soldiers were afraid to sleep. They were afraid of the dark. "We must understand our enemy," said the eldest council member, a female named Hal whose scales had turned white with age. "We have ruled this galaxy for 8,000 years because we knew how to break our enemies. We do not know how to break the humans." She turned to a figure standing in the shadows of the chamber. "Ambassador Ox, you have spent the last 3 months studying humanity. Tell us what you have learned." Ambassador Ox stepped forward. She was the Dominion's foremost expert on alien psychology. She had studied every species that had conquered. She understood how different creatures thought and felt, but she had never looked as troubled as she did now. "Honored Council," she began, her voice steady but quiet. "I must tell you something that you will not want to hear. We have made a terrible error, not a tactical error or a strategic error. We have made a psychological error. We have awakened something in humanity that we do not know how to fight." The council members shifted uncomfortably. X frowned but said nothing. Ox continued, "When we conquer other species, we break their will to resist. The public execution of prisoners shows them that fighting is hopeless. It creates despair, and despair leads to surrender. This has always worked because other species fight for logical reasons. They fight for survival, for territory, for resources. When they see that they cannot win, they stop fighting." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Humans are different. They do not always fight for logical reasons. They have a concept that we have never encountered before. They call it revenge." We know about revenge, X interrupted. Other species have wanted revenge against us. They got over it when they realized they could not win. No, Ox said firmly. You do not understand. What other species feel is anger. Anger fades with time. Anger can be suppressed by fear. What humans feel is something deeper, something colder, something that does not fade. She activated a holographic display showing images from human history. Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. In that time, they have developed the concept of the blood feud. When one human group wrongs another, the hatred can last for generations. Parents teach their children to hate. Children teach their. The original reason for the hatred is sometimes forgotten, but the hatred itself remains. The images showed ancient human conflicts, wars that lasted decades, grudges that lasted centuries. Humans have a saying, Ox continued. Revenge is a dish best served cold. This means that they believe revenge is better when it is delayed. They are willing to wait, to plan, to prepare, and then to strike when their enemy least expects it. Hal leaned forward. Are you saying that the humans are not just fighting us, they are taking revenge for new? Yes, but it is worse than that. Ox changed the display to show the broadcast from new. The image froze on Captain's face, her smile visible even as she faced death. The 2,847 prisoners we executed were not just soldiers to humanity. They were individuals. They had names, families, stories. Every human in the galaxy now knows those names. They have memorized them. They have carved them on walls and spoken them in ceremonies. Those prisoners have become martyrs. What is a martyr? Asked another council member. A martyr is someone whose death inspires others to fight harder. Instead of breaking humanity's spirit, we have united them. Instead of creating despair, we have created purpose. Every human now has a reason to fight that has nothing to do with logic or survival. They fight because they loved the people we killed. They fight because they want us to pay. The chamber was silent. X felt cold despite the warmth of the room. Ox continued. There is another human concept you must understand. They call it total war. When humans decide that an enemy must be destroyed, they commit everything. Every resource, every person, every factory and farm and ship. They do not seek negotiated peace. They do not accept partial victory. They fight until their enemy is completely and utterly defeated. She showed more images. Human cities reduced to rubble in ancient wars. Entire nations destroyed. Armies that refused to surrender even when they had no hope of winning. Humans are capable of terrible destruction when they feel justified. And right now, they feel completely justified. We gave them footage of their people being executed. We gave them a clear enemy to hate. We gave them a reason to fight that requires no debate or discussion. Every human in the galaxy agrees on one thing: they must pay for new. Hal's voice was barely a whisper. What do they want? What will make them stop? Ox was quiet for a long moment. I do not know if anything will make them stop. They may not want territory or resources. They may not want submission or apology. They may simply want us to suffer as they have suffered, to feel the fear and loss that they felt watching their soldiers die. Then we will destroy them, X said, his voice hard. We have the largest fleet in the galaxy. We will find their worlds and burn them. You could try, Ox replied, but I must warn you of something else. Humans become more dangerous when they are cornered. When they believe they have nothing left to lose, they fight with complete disregard for their own survival. They call this fighting spirit. They are proud of it. If you try to destroy them, they will make you pay such a terrible price that victory will mean nothing. She turned off the display and faced the council directly. We have conquered 17 species by making them afraid of us, but humans are not afraid. They are angry, and their anger is patient and cold and will not stop until it is satisfied. We do not know how to fight an enemy like this. We have never needed to. The council members looked at each other. For the first time in 8,000 years, the rulers of the Dominion did not know what to do. X stood rigidly, refusing to show his own uncertainty. We will increase our defenses. We will hunt down their shadow warriors. We will show them that the Dominion cannot be defeated. But even as he spoke, he remembered Smile. He remembered her words, "You do not know what you have just started." He was beginning to understand what she meant. And somewhere out in the vast darkness of space, human fleets were gathering. Human soldiers were training. Human engineers were building weapons that they had never imagined. The Shadow War was almost over. The real war was about to begin. The human offensive began without warning on a day that would later be called the Day of Reckoning. It did not start with a great battle. It started with silence. In a single hour, every major communication relay in the Dominion stopped working. Supply convoys lost contact with their destinations. Military commanders could not reach their fleets. The entire network that held the Empire together simply went dark. X was on his flagship when it happened. One moment his screens showed reports from across the Dominion. The next moment there was nothing but static. His communications officer worked frantically at his console, trying to restore the connections. But there was nothing to restore. The relays were not damaged. They had been. Human code had been inserted into their systems months ago, waiting for a signal to activate. While they scrambled to understand what was happening, the second phase began. Human ships appeared from nowhere at 17 different locations across the Dominion. They did not attack military targets. They attacked fuel depots, food storage facilities, ammunition factories, the critical infrastructure that kept the war machine running. The attacks were surgical and precise. Human ships would jump into a system, destroy their targets in minutes, and jump away before defenders could respond. They had clearly studied their targets for months. They knew exactly where to strike and how. Within a week, the Dominion's logistics network was in chaos. Fleets found themselves stranded without fuel. Armies ran low on supplies. Worlds that had never worried about such things suddenly faced shortages. And then the blockades began. Human warships surrounded agricultural worlds. They did not bombard them. They did not invade. They simply sat in orbit and waited. Any ship that tried to leave was disabled and captured. Any ship that tried to enter was turned away. The message was clear. The Dominion would starve unless it surrendered. X gathered every warship he could reach and led a fleet to break the blockade at Prime's main agricultural colony. He had 200 ships. The humans had only 60. This should have been an easy victory. It was not. The human ships were different from what they had faced at Nu. They were faster and more maneuverable. Their weapons had been upgraded, and their tactics were unlike anything X had seen before. Instead of forming battle lines, the human ships scattered and regrouped constantly. They attacked from unexpected angles. They focused fire on single targets, destroying them quickly before moving to the next. They used their smaller ships to get close to vessels, then unleashed weapons that seemed to ignore shields. The battle lasted 4 hours. X lost 93 ships, the humans lost 12, and the blockade remained unbroken. As X retreated, a human ship broadcast a message on all frequencies. It showed the faces of the 2,847 soldiers who had died on Nu. Each face was displayed for just 1 second, one after another. It took almost 50 minutes for all the faces to appear. At the end, a voice spoke in perfect language. "We remember every name. We remember every face. Do you understand yet what you have done?" The ground war came next. Human soldiers landed on colony worlds. They came in small groups at first, establishing bases in remote areas. Then more arrived, and more. They had always won ground battles through superior numbers and firepower. The humans won through speed and surprise. Human soldiers did not fight like other species. They did not form neat lines or follow predictable patterns. They attacked at night. They set traps. They vanished into forests and cities and struck from shadows. When cornered, they fought with a ferocity that shocked them. Even wounded, even outnumbered, they kept fighting. One officer reported that he had shot a human 3 times, and the human had still managed to kill 2 of his soldiers before finally dying. "They do not know when to stop," the officer wrote in his final report. "They do not know when they are supposed to be dead." But the most shocking thing about the human invasion was not how they fought. It was what they did with prisoners. When soldiers surrendered, the humans did not execute them. They did not torture them. They took them to camps where they were given food and medical care. They were allowed to contact their families. They were treated according to something humans called the Geneva Conventions, a set of rules about how prisoners should be treated. At first, commanders thought this was a trick. They warned their soldiers not to surrender, saying that the humans would surely torture and kill them eventually. But reports kept coming back from captured soldiers. They were alive. They were unharmed. They were being treated fairly. This confused them more than anything else. They had executed human prisoners. They had broadcasted across the galaxy. Why were the humans not doing the same? A human general named gave an interview that was broadcast into space. He was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes. He spoke calmly and clearly. "We are not you," he said. "We will never be you. What you did on Nu was evil. We could do the same thing to your people. We could line up your soldiers and execute them while the whole galaxy watches. It would feel good, probably. It would feel like justice." He paused and shook his head. But it would not be justice. It would be revenge. And revenge is not enough. We want something more. We want to show the universe that humanity is better than those who wronged us. We want to prove that you can defeat your enemies without becoming a monster. He looked directly into the camera. "We will win this war, make no mistake about that. Your dominion is already collapsing. Your fleets are scattered. Your worlds are isolated. You have maybe 6 months before complete defeat. But when we win, we will not slaughter your people. We will not erase your culture. We will simply make sure you can never threaten anyone again. And then we will help you rebuild if you let us." Many did not believe him, but some did. And those who believed began to surrender in larger numbers. Some entire units gave up without fighting. They had seen how their prisoners were treated. They had heard generals' words. They decided that survival was better than dying for a cause that was already lost. X watched his empire crumble around him. World after world fell to the humans. Fleet after fleet was destroyed or captured. The council members fled or surrendered. Only he remained, hiding in a secret bunker on a remote moon, still refusing to accept defeat. He still had a few loyal ships. He still had soldiers who would fight for him. He planned a final offensive, a desperate strike at human supply lines that might turn the tide. It never happened. One morning, X woke to find human soldiers standing in his room. They had gotten past all his defenses, all his guards, all his security systems. They had done it silently, without setting off a single alarm. Their leader was a woman with dark hair and dark eyes. She looked familiar somehow. When she spoke, her voice was calm. "Supreme Commander X," she said. "My name is Lieutenant Commander Sophia, was my sister. I have been looking for you for a very long time." X felt true fear for the first time in his life. He expected her to kill him. He expected her to take revenge for her sister's death. Instead, she simply said, "You are under arrest for crimes against humanity. You will stand trial, you will face justice. Real justice, not revenge. That is what my sister would have wanted." She handcuffed him and led him away. The war was over. The Dominion had fallen. And X finally understood what Captain had meant when she smiled before she died. She had known this moment would come. She had known that her death would lead to this. The humans had not just defeated the Dominion. They had proven something far more important. They had proven that strength and mercy could exist together, that you could crush your enemies and still remain human. It was a lesson the galaxy would never forget. The war ended 14 months after it began. The Dominion, undefeated for 8,000 years, had collapsed completely. Their great fleets were gone. Their vast empire was broken into pieces. Their leaders had surrendered or been captured. The galaxy had changed forever. But the humans did not celebrate their victory with parades or parties. Instead, they built a memorial. It stood in Geneva, on Earth, in a place that had been important to human history for centuries. The Memorial of Nu was a simple structure. A long wall of black granite curved in a gentle arc. On this wall, 2,847 names were carved. Each name was illuminated by a small eternal flame that would burn forever. At the center of the memorial, a holographic image of Captain played on a loop. Her final words echoed softly in the quiet space. Millions of humans visited the memorial in the first year. They came to pay their respects. They came to remember. Some came because they had known one of the fallen soldiers personally. Others came because they wanted to understand why the war had been fought. Supreme Commander X was brought to the memorial 6 months after his capture. He had been held in a human prison during that time. He had not been tortured or mistreated. He had been given food and shelter and even books to read. This treatment confused him more than cruelty would have. Now he stood before the wall of names, surrounded by human guards. The woman who had captured him, Sophia, stood nearby. She had insisted on being present for this moment. A human official approached X. He was an elderly man with white hair and kind eyes. His name was Director, and he was in charge of what humans called transitional justice. Supreme Commander, Director said, you ordered the execution of these 2,847 people. You broadcast their deaths to terrify humanity. Instead, you united us. You gave us a reason to fight that nothing could break. He gestured to the wall. You are going to read every name on this wall out loud. You are going to look at each flame and understand that it represents a person you killed, a person with hopes and dreams and people who loved them. This will take several days. You will not be allowed to stop until you have read every name. X stared at the wall. The names seemed to stretch forever. Why? He asked. What purpose does this serve? Understanding, Director replied. You killed these people because they were just numbers to you, enemies to be destroyed. You need to understand that they were individuals. Each one mattered. And so X began to read. The first name was Private Aaron, age 22, born on Earth, loved music and played the guitar, had just proposed to his girlfriend before deploying to Nu. The second name was Corporal Maria, age 28, born on Mars, had 2 young children waiting for her at home, had volunteered for the new Defense Force because she believed in protecting others. The third name was Sergeant Benjamin Ali, age 35, born on Nu itself, had lived his whole life on that world and died defending it. X read name after name, hour after hour, day after day. Each name came with a small holographic display that showed the person's face and a brief description of their life. He could not rush through them. The system would not let him continue until he had spent at least 30 seconds with each name. By the end of the first day, he had read 412 names. His voice was hoarse. His legs ached from standing. But the guards did not let him stop until the scheduled break time. That night, lying in his cell, X could not sleep. The faces he had seen kept appearing in his mind. Young faces, old faces, faces that had been full of life before he ordered them destroyed. The reading continued for 3 more days. X learned about teachers and farmers, engineers and artists, parents and children. He learned about humans who had been afraid but fought anyway. Humans who had died protecting their friends. Humans who had used their last moments to record messages for their families. When he finally reached the last name, Captain, his voice broke. He stared at her holographic image for a long time. She was smiling, just as she had smiled before she died. I understand now, he whispered. I understand what I did. Director nodded. Good, now you have a choice. You can spend the rest of your life in prison, or you can spend it teaching young about what happened here, about why executing prisoners is wrong, about why mercy is stronger than cruelty. The choice is yours. X thought about this for a long time. Prison would be easier. He could hide from what he had done. But something had changed in him during those 3 days of reading names. Something had broken, but something else had grown in its place. I will teach, he said. I owe them that much. Years passed. The galaxy slowly rebuilt itself. They were not destroyed as a people. Instead, they were helped to form a new government based on different values. Human advisors worked with leaders to create laws protecting prisoners of war. Other species, seeing what had happened, adopted similar laws. X kept his promise. He traveled to schools and military academies. He told the story of Nu. He made students read the names of the fallen, just as he had done. He taught them that every enemy was also a person with a life and a story. Some hated him for this. They called him a traitor who had betrayed his people, but many others listened. A new generation grew up believing that cruelty was weakness, not strength. One day, 20 years after the war, a young historian named Ox came to interview X for a book she was writing. She wanted to understand the human victory from the perspective of someone who had lived through it. Why did they show mercy? She asked. They had every reason to destroy us. We killed their people. We broadcast their deaths. We tried to humiliate them. Why did they not do the same to us? X, now old and slow, thought carefully before answering. That question haunted me for years. I finally found an answer, but it did not come from me. It came from a human. He told her about a conversation he had once had with Sophia, the sister of Captain. They had met at the memorial on the 10th anniversary of the war. She had come to place flowers at her sister's name. X had approached her nervously. He did not know if she would speak to him or simply walk away, but she had listened to his question. Why did we show mercy? Sophia had repeated. She had looked at the wall of names for a long time before answering. Because we wanted you to remember. The dead cannot remember. The dead cannot regret. The dead cannot change. If we had killed all of you, the lesson would have died with you. But by letting you live, by making you understand what you did, we ensured that the lesson would last forever. She had touched her sister's name on the wall. Died so that future generations could live in a galaxy where prisoners are not executed, where cruelty has consequences, where mercy is strength, not weakness. That was worth dying for. Revenge would have just been revenge. This is something more. This is a reckoning. What is the difference? X had asked. Sophia had smiled then, the same smile her sister had worn before she died. Revenge is about making yourself feel better. Reckoning is about making sure it never happens again. The young historian Ox wrote down these words carefully. And has it happened again? X shook his head. In the 20 years since the war, no species in this galaxy has executed prisoners of war. The new conventions are followed by every government, every military, every organization. The humans did not just win a war. They changed the rules of how the galaxy works. Ox thought about this. The humans seem very proud of their mercy, but they also showed they could be very dangerous when angered. Are they good or evil? X laughed, though there was sadness in it. They are both. That is what makes them human. They have the capacity for terrible destruction and great compassion. They can hate with a fury that burns worlds, and then forgive when forgiveness seems impossible. They are complicated in ways that we are not. He looked out the window at the sky. We made a fatal mistake when we killed those prisoners, not because we made them angry, but because we showed them who they could become. We showed them the worst of what war could be, and they responded by showing us the best of what peace could be. He turned back to the historian. That is why they won, not because their ships were better or their soldiers braver. They won because when they had the chance to become monsters, they chose to remain human. and in doing so, they showed all of us a different way to live. The historian finished her book. It became required reading for every student, and across the galaxy, the story of Nu was told and retold. It was a story about war and revenge, but more than that, it was a story about mercy, about the power of remembering, about choosing to be better than those who hurt you. The 2,847 names still glow on that wall in Geneva. People still come to read them, and humanity, fierce and compassionate and complicated and human, still remembers every name. They always will. The end.